Namaste and welcome everyone to this edition of the Jaipur Dialogues. And we have today Robert Spencer with us after a long, long time. So welcome, Robert. And of course, we have Vibhuti Jha as well. So welcome, Robert, in this season
Thank you.
when you're not allowed to celebrate Christmas. How do you feel about it?
Well, it wouldn't be right to celebrate Christmas because it would be non-inclusive to non-Christians, and so Europeans are learning now that they have to forget all about Christmas. Paris has canceled Christmas and New Year's celebrations that it had for years, and other areas are setting up big barricades. Of course, all of this is in view of the fact that Islamic jihadis have already attacked Christmas markets. They will likely try to attack Christmas markets again. There have been plots uncovered this year as well. And so this is the future that Europe has chosen for itself. It is something that didn't have to happen, but they have decided to bring in massive numbers of Muslims. And this is unlike bringing in any other immigrant group. No other immigrant group has any problem in the West. But when you bring in large numbers of Muslims and they believe that the non-Muslims are the most vile of created beings, as the Quran says,
Yeah.
they don't tend to have respect
98.6.
the native population. And consequently, as this lack of respect manifests itself in various ways, one of them is that they target Christmas celebrations, and the infidels, being for the most part idiots, they go along and they just cancel everything. I don't know what the French are thinking, though, because do they think that things are going to calm down and they'll be able to resume their celebrations in a few years? And then they're whistling in the dark. The cultural self-abnegation is permanent and irreversible.
I know. You're quite right. I think it's probably one of the few pushbacks have been the Babri Mosque case. So for that, you have to applaud India, I guess.
Absolutely, yes. That's unprecedented, and I hope there'll be much more of it, because most people don't even realize, they think that the Islamic world is just the Islamic world and always has been. And that, moreover, it became that way by entirely organic means. I remember even reading, it was a book of museum exhibits, and in the explanations of some artifact from Egypt, it said, this is a Coptic Christian artifact from whatever, the 3rd century or something. And at this time, Egypt was almost entirely Christian, but later Egypt adopted Islam.
Adopted.
And the Egyptians made some decision to convert to Islam on the basis of the compelling benefits and beauty of the Islamic faith, when actually, of course, this is not what happened in Egypt or anywhere else. Egypt became Muslim because the Muslims took power and they subjected the non-Muslims to so much discrimination and harassment, with the ever-present promise that they could get free of all that discrimination and harassment if they just converted to Islam. They made conversion to Islam a matter of living well in this world, while the Muslims were enforcing the Quran's statements that the unbelievers will suffer in this world as well as in the next. And so, as a result, Egypt became predominantly Muslim. But most people have no idea. And they think this was all a peaceful, organic transformation over time. And so when they see mosques in various countries, they assume that the mosques were built in much the atmosphere that a church or a synagogue or a Hindu temple would be built in ordinary circumstances, that the people in the area are of this faith and they want to have a place where they can worship, and so they build it. That's all. nobody or hardly anybody in the West is aware that mosques, for the most part, in India and in many areas of Asia Minor, in the Middle East, in Egypt, in North Africa, they were built on the sites that were sacred to other religions. And that was done in a deliberate way in order to demonstrate the victory and superiority of Islam. And that the Muslims have conquered and are victorious because Allah has given them victory. Now, the Babri Mosque, that's one of the only examples of that being reversed in the entire world. You have Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. It was the grandest church in the Christian world for almost 1,000 years. Now it's a mosque. You have the Church of St. John the Baptist in Damascus. Now it's the Umayyad Mosque. You have, of course, the temple, the Jewish temple that was destroyed in 70 AD. And then in the 7th century, the Muslims put Al-Aqsa and the Dome of the Rock there. And this is all to show that Islam has defeated Christianity and is superior to Christianity, and Islam has defeated Judaism and is superior to Judaism. And thousands of course, as you know better than I, thousands of Hindu temples all over India were destroyed and mosques built over them to show that Islam was superior to Hinduism and had defeated Hinduism. And now in this one place, people have fought back. And it's kind of like Israel, because Israel was Muslim land, and the idea is that Islam always expands and never contracts. And in this one area, they got kicked out, and also in Spain. And so this is why Spain is on the list. Israel is the foremost enemy, and India is the target of ongoing outrage and ongoing jihad, because these are the only places where the Islamic advance has been stopped and reversed.
Actually, there are several temples. There are several temples right from the time of Shivaji. There have been several temples that have been reclaimed. There's Triambakeshwar temple near Nashik, several smaller temples, and there's also the Somnath temple that was built after shifting the existing mosque there. That was, of course, dilapidated, but it was shifted nevertheless. And they built a temple there. That was right in 1948 between 1948 and 1950. So before I go further, Vibhuti ji, do you have any questions, please?
Yes, I have a question and a statement, Robert. It's good to see you after such a long time.
Likewise.
I have certain propositions to suggest to direct the conversation in one way or the other, and that is, France was the first one to wave the white flag, as always. They did to Germany. Now they are doing this. So Macron seems to be more worried about the chocolates or the toffees than the French pride. I mean, unless the French pride lives in there. Should France be ejected from Security Council? Should there be a move on that part? For Europe as a whole, UK as a whole, there has to be a social upheaval for that kind of a thing. Let's raise the demand for that. Let's throw it out in the social media that for the abject surrender. Do you think that Islam is colonizing the Europe? To use the European tool, they colonize the whole world with their imperial practices. Is Islam colonizing Europe and America too? Because now we are looking at a very valid scenario. You use the word peaceful organic takeover, which is what is happening in America with reference to Texas, their epic cities. You heard in Oklahoma yesterday or day before, where the city council passed the bill despite opposition, with an overwhelming majority, to brand agricultural land as business proposition and approve buildings and structures without approvals, without with the measurements or the approval of the building authorities. Is America being taken over, as you said, peaceful organic takeover is happening?
When I said peaceful organic takeover, I was referring to the historical fiction of the idea that the Islamic world, the Middle East and North Africa and the rest of it, was converted to Islam by means of people becoming convinced that Islam was true and converting freely and without coercion. That's
exactly the process now of the 21st century. They are, when in Epic City argument happened in the town council, the Pakistani lawyer made a statement: we are building our own cities as per your constitution, which protects our freedom of religion. Look at the surreptitious way in which they are doing it. That's the point which I'm trying to drive at. I'm not drawing an equal parallel. What I'm saying is the same peaceful takeover is happening. Look at Minneapolis. Look at Oklahoma. Look at everywhere else. Trump made a pompous statement that we are going to let the whole world unite to fight Islamic terrorism after Bondi attack happened. Nobody is covering, nobody's talking about that. So what's happening in America? We live here.
What you're referring to really is the false distinction that American officials and European officials make between peaceful Muslims and violent Muslims. And it might seem to be a very useful distinction, but it isn't, and I'll explain. Most American policymakers, politicians, law enforcement officials, and intelligence officials, they think you're either a jihadi or you're a moderate if you're a Muslim. And they think if you're a moderate, if you're not a jihadi, then you reject jihad and you believe in peaceful coexistence and mutual respect. Those are false beliefs. Those are false assumptions. You can be a nonviolent jihadi. I wrote a book in 2008 called Stealth Jihad, which is just exactly about this, that the jihad advances in order to establish the hegemony of Sharia, Islamic law. And it can do that by blowing things up and killing people in order to destabilize the existing government, ultimately destroy it, and replace it with a Sharia state. But it can also do that by completely nonviolent means that that take the actions that are allowed by the laws of the country, as the fellow you noted in Texas, who said, we're using your constitution to take over. They are manipulating the weaknesses of the American system in order, or the weaknesses of those who are enforcing the U.S. Constitution in order to ultimately destroy the U.S. Constitution and establish a Sharia state here. And nobody's paying attention, hardly anyone, and nobody is aware of what's happening because they are stuck on the distinction between violent Muslims and moderates. And they think the moderates, the nonviolent ones, are just great, and we have no reason to be concerned about them. Really, though, if we look at it from the standpoint of the goals of both groups, the jihadis and the people who are working in Texas with Epic City and the people in Dearborn and Minneapolis and so on, they all have the same goal, and that is to establish Sharia. And they're just going about it through different means, and we should be aware of the goal more than the means.
And just to add to that, just 1 minute, Sanjay ji, you saw that Tucker Carlson in his speech at Turning Point made the famous statement that he made, that all Muslims are peaceful. Let's not go join everybody else. Either he was fulfilling the statement of the Qatari minister who said that we have journalists in my pocket in our payroll who advance our cause. Is Tucker fallen into that scenario?
Well, there are widespread rumors, of course, that he's indeed paid off by Qatar. His statements now, they contradict his earlier statements, because years ago you can find video of him warning about Sharia and warning about jihad. And now he doesn't say, he says just the opposite, as you noted. And so something's changed. Something has gotten to him, whether he's had a genuine change of heart or whether it's a matter of being paid or threatened, we don't know. But in any case, he is a classic example now, because he's saying these Muslims that you are upset about are not jihadis, and so you have nothing to worry about in regard to them, which completely ignores the nonviolent imperative to establish Sharia. And that's what has to be recognized on a large scale if America and Europe are going to save themselves.
I just wanted a clarification on what you said, and that is, are the Muslim Brotherhood methods different from the earlier methods, say, of the past centuries?
Yes, there's a big difference in what's happened starting in the 20th century. And this is a result of the loss of Muslim political power. The caliphate was abolished in 1924. And before that, of course, the Ottoman Empire was weak and essentially ineffective for decades. And so the age in which the great Islamic empires, not just the Ottomans, of course, but the Mughals in India and others, those are gone. But the jihad imperative is not gone. And I explain this in my book, The History of Jihad, that there was a shift at the fall of the Ottoman Empire to more stealthy means, that by means of infiltration and influence operations and activities of that kind, the Islamic world would still continue to pursue the jihad against the non-Muslims. And so we see it in India. We see the same thing in Europe and North America, that there are influential Muslim opinion makers, there are influential Muslim politicians, and they are all advocating for measures that, if they all succeeded in being adopted, would be followed by others like them that would ultimately result in a Sharia state. And so the goal is exactly the same as what the Ottomans had and the Mughals and all the jihadis of history. The goal is exactly the same, but the means have radically changed in the absence of there being a great Islamic world power.
So how do you look at this this Bondi Beach bombing? And not exactly the massacre as such, but what happened afterwards? Even today, I believe a certain 5 or 6 persons were going to the Bondi Beach again, and they were planning to attack those who were mourning there at the Bondi Beach. And they were somehow found out, and the police rammed their car and saved another massacre, I guess. But people are not condemning them, and the Prime Minister is not attending their funeral.
Well, if I may add, the worst part of the story of the car that was rammed and the Muslims who were arrested, and they were apparently on their way to attack mourners at Bondi Beach, they have already been released. And they have been released because the police explained the circumstances under which they were arrested no longer exist, which is a very strange thing to say, because if they were planning a jihad massacre, they can plan another jihad massacre. It might not be at the same time and place that they had initially planned it, but it's just absolutely ridiculous how the Australian authorities are dealing with this problem. And of course, it's the same way that British authorities and European authorities and North American authorities genuinely are dealing with this problem. It's absolutely stupid, completely ill-informed, willfully ignorant in regard to the jihad threat. Albanese, the Prime Minister of Australia, even said diversity is our strength in the wake of the attack. And diversity is most certainly not our strength, as has been shown in the Bondi Beach attack itself, and in other indications that, once again, bringing in large numbers of Muslims was not wise, because it did not take into account the jihad ideology and the fact that there would be attacks on the non-Muslims in the country. And consequently, diversity is not our strength by any stretch of the imagination. And for him to just be repeating these tired slogans is ridiculous. There's one other thing, and that is Ahmed al-Ahmed. We have to mention him because he's been the hero of the peace, and rightly so. He tackled Navid Akram, one of the jihadis, and stopped him from firing. So some lives were saved. Ahmed al-Ahmed, according to many reports, is a Muslim. And he was shot twice as he was tackling this man. And he's been hailed not only as a hero, as he should be, but also as an indication that this has nothing to do with Islam. And Bernie Sanders, for example, the senator in the United States from Vermont, let me get it here. He said that we have to avoid Islamophobia. And he said it on the basis of he made a very interesting statement in this connection. And it was this. He said, we must stand together and end anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and all hate. And he based this on this. He said this: Ahmed al-Ahmed, a Muslim father of two, risked his life to disarm a murderer who was shooting down Jews celebrating Hanukkah in Sydney. Now, notice that he mentions that Ahmed al-Ahmed's a Muslim, but he doesn't mention that the shooters were Muslim. And what he's trying to say is that you want to see the real Islam, it's Ahmed al-Ahmed who stopped the shooters, not the shooters. But that's exactly backward. In fact, it's the shooters who can point to Quran saying, kill them wherever you find them. And when you meet the unbelievers, strike the necks, and so many other passages. And Ahmed al-Ahmed can't point to Quran to say, stop jihadis from shooting Jews. There's nothing in there like that. And so it's Ahmed al-Ahmed is being used to deflect attention away from the conversation the non-Muslim world has to have, which is about, what are we going to do about Islam? Islam is a danger to all non-Muslims. What are we going to do about it? And Ahmed al-Ahmed is being used to prevent that conversation from being had.
There are two things more in this. One is that reports are coming that this gentleman who caught hold of the shooter is being vilified, not just in the Arab world, but in the entire Muslim world.
Yes.
And is being accused of being an infidel or infidel sympathizer. That is one. And the second is that large number of people are coming and saying that, well, Quran doesn't preach terror, or Islam doesn't preach terror.
Indeed. And this is remarkable because it's an indication that Islam does preach terror, that the news went out about Ahmed al-Ahmed on Ramallah News, which is a Palestinian publication. And 75% of the comments were against Ahmed al-Ahmed, and even some of them threatening to kill him. And so you would think the Palestinians probably know their religion real well because their whole society is based on it, and yet they hate Ahmed al-Ahmed in large numbers. And so this is something that the West persists in refusing to understand. And the longer it does that, the more danger it will be in, and the danger is brought upon by itself.
Now, the other part also is very important with reference to Bondi.
You didn't answer that part about Islam doesn't preach terror.
Well, Islam does preach terror. Islam says, strike terror in the enemies of Allah. It's chapter 8, verse 60. And whenever I quote that, there's also 8:12 and 3:151 that mention terror. And whenever I quote those passages, there are Muslims who come in, say on Twitter or somewhere, and they say, that doesn't mean terror like terrorism, you idiot. That means terror like the fear of God or awe in the presence of God. But the reality is different. If you read chapter 8 of the Quran, Al-Anfal, the spoils of war, it's very clear. Those passages are in the context of battle. Chapter 8, verse 60 follows, for example, chapter 8, verse 41, which says that when you are waging jihad against the infidels and you come back with the spoils of war, you have to give a fifth to the messenger. There's no spiritual struggle. There's no spoils of war in a spiritual struggle. If you pray, there's no spoils of war to give a fifth to the messenger. But if you're fighting battles and winning and getting their property and their women, then you can give a fifth to the messenger. So it's very clear we're talking about hot war against infidels, and it's in that context that the Quran says strike terror. So the Quran does directly teach that Muslims should terrorize non-Muslims, make them afraid. And that's what they try to do all the time. They even do it on a small scale. You know, Islamic apologists in the West, they're always trying to intimidate the people that they speak to. They mock them, they call them names, they claim that they're lying, they claim that they're morally corrupt, they claim that they are inaccurate and stupid. And all of these things are designed to put the non-Muslim speaker on the defensive and be afraid. It's all terror. Terrorism is not just killing people, but it's also terrifying them. And this is the traffic this is what Islam traffics in. Large and small, big and little, it's always terror all the way through. Muslims are terrified before Allah. Muslim women are terrified before Muslim men. Non-Muslims are terrified in the face of Muslims. It's all terror, straight through.
Okay, Vibhuti ji.
He's frozen, looks like to me.
Yeah. Hello, Mr. Vibhuti Jha, are you there? No, he seems to have logged out. Maybe. Okay, he'll come back. Next point I wanted to ask was about this movie Dhurandhar, of which you carried a review. And hello, yeah, of which you carried a review in your website.
Yes.
You really think that this kind of movie can really change the narrative about Islam, at least among the non-Islamic communities?
Yes, very much so. I think that I was very happy to receive this review and to publish it. This was written by an Indian lady who writes at Jihad Watch fairly regularly, and there are 2 more articles by her there today. And she writes under the name of Ashlyn Davis, and I highly recommend her writings to you and to your audience. But in any case, she writes very compellingly about how the film goes against the prevailing cultural narrative in India. And I found this very interesting because, of course, it's the same cultural narrative in the United States. In the establishment media, in Hollywood, it's the same as in Bollywood. Muslims are always the victims. Muslims are always either the hero or the victim, that they're either doing something wonderful and saving the day, or they are being unjustly victimized by non-Muslims. And this is, unfortunately, the environment. This is what people imbibe nowadays far more than they read websites or books. I write as a vocation. I was always a writer. It's the only thing I know how to do and the only thing I'm interested in doing. And I write a lot of books, but I'm aware that people don't read books nowadays. For the most part, they watch videos, and they are informed by watching videos. And so this is the power that Bollywood has, that they can put out these movies that are extremely tendentious culturally and historically, and giving a false view of Muslims and Islam. And people by the millions think this is the way it is, or that it's the way that they ought to be. And so a movie like this could make a huge difference, because it will open people's eyes to the nature and magnitude of the jihad in Jammu and Kashmir and the jihad in general in a way that it has not been done before. And so it's what is that other there was a movie not long ago also. Do you know the one I'm talking about? I never got a chance to see it, but they got quite a lot of
The Kashmir Files or the Bengal Files?
Yeah. And so that these kinds of things could completely change the public discussion of these issues in India and in its environment.
Yes, Vibhuti ji. You got
Yeah,
locked out, it seems.
I got dropped out somewhere along the line. The laws of technology also operate at times.
It
Maybe
was
you are policed by the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah, possibly. But I wanted to ask you a few questions. Wanted to know from you. You have been very vocal. Amy Mack has been very vocal. But nobody, neither Republicans nor Democrats, seem to be listening to either one of us. To you and Amy Mack particularly, who's taking enormous risks in doing what they do. And what I find here is that in various elements, the takeover is moving in a pretty good speed, despite Muslims being just about 5 million in America, or 4.5 or 5 million in UK, or whatever percentage in Paris or France or whatever. That both in political capturing, look at Zohran. He's appointing a guy.
Oh, I think he's frozen again.
It's frozen again. Actually being policed by the Muslim Brotherhood. They
Yes.
don't want to ask questions. Anyway, you got the gist of his question.
Yes, absolutely. And well, it's certainly true in a certain sense. I mean, I feel like I've been shouting into the void for 25 years or more, because for the most part, none of the things that I've been warning about have been heeded. This is especially true ever since about, well, really, it's hard to put a particular date on it, but right after 9/11, there was a lot more discussion of these issues in the mainstream. I was on Fox regularly. There was a lot of openness to talking about these issues. I was even on CNN and MSNBC. Now that would not even come close to happening. But even Fox as well, they just don't want to discuss these things. And in those days also, I met with quite a few people who were in Congress and other officials. I taught in the FBI and the military, and all of that ended. And so it's
Haven't they taken you back?
no, I haven't heard from anybody, and I'm not waiting by the phone. But I do see some positive signs that one of the things I think is happening, as a matter of fact, is that because of things like the election of Zohran Mamdani and the victories that they're achieving all over the place, people are waking up. And recently there have been several elected officials. I haven't had any contact with them at all, but Senator Tuberville of Alabama and Congressman Randy Fine and some others have been sounding the alarm about, Chip Roy, Representative Chip Roy, who I believe is from Texas.
Texas, yes.
They have been sounding the alarm about Sharia, about jihad, about Islamization, in ways that make me think that maybe it hasn't all been a waste, that they have been reading some things perhaps that we have written, or they've just picked it up from somewhere. But in any case, these things are suddenly on the map again. And so I hesitate to be optimistic always, because you end up being disappointed. But at the same time, I have to acknowledge that there has been a positive movement in just the last few months. And it may be that as the crisis grows and as things continue to happen, such as the election of Mamdani, then there will be also a response that grows, and it's already happening.
So many of them got elected in the UK, but nothing happened. No alarms.
The UK
No
does
wisdom.
not matter. The UK is like France, only worse. I don't know what's happening in the UK. I was banned from entering the UK in 2013 for saying that Islam had doctrines of violence, which is like banning me for saying that water will get you wet. It's just incredible. But nonetheless, I kept for some years after that a running list of jihad preachers who were admitted into Britain with no problem, and of other critics of jihad and Islam who were barred. And so Britain has chosen the situation that it's in. They didn't want to discuss these issues. they stigmatized and demonized those of us who did discuss them, and now they are reaping the consequences.
Oh, yes, I think Tommy
I wanted
Robinson
to
was
make a
even
mention
jailed.
of that to take your word, I'm disappointed, but I'm optimistic because I do believe that the third law of physics will get into motion sometime.
I hope
There will be, and that is happening, in my opinion. That is gathering momentum. The number of people who saw Dhurandhar, who were non-Indians, was not funny. Actually, people were going on internet and talking about it. That I
excellent.
sat through the entire. It is interval time, and man, I have been so engrossed. Not a time, not a moment wasted. And after the movie says, got to know things that I did not know before. So there is definitely
The jinn have struck again.
like Schindler's List and others.
So you again get the gist of the question. So you can.
Well, I think that Vibhuti was just saying that there is a positive movement and that it is growing larger. And so from that, we can be encouraged and continue to work because, of course, there's a great deal more that needs to be done.
Thank you.
Well, you want to add to that question? Because it's already been briefly answered.
Okay, then it's all right. Then I don't have to ask anymore if it has been answered already. But one thing which I wanted to ask you about in American context is the entire concept of Islamophobia. Both Republicans and
Both Republicans and Democrats accept it. They both believe that it exists. They both are on record denouncing it, and it's equally ridiculous from both parties. Islamophobia is a term that was coined in order to stigmatize, demonize, marginalize, and silence any criticism of Islam or any honest discussion of jihad, Sharia, and the oppression of women, the war against non-Muslims, and so on. These kinds of things are, of course, against the jihad, against Islam to discuss, because the whole idea is that Islam must conquer and dominate and subjugate the non-Muslims. And if the non-Muslims are talking about how that might not be a good idea, then they might resist. And so the idea is to keep the non-Muslims ignorant and complacent by making them think that Islamophobia is a big problem, and they have to not talk about jihad and not talk about Sharia, because otherwise they might commit Islamophobia. And so it's a tool to silence opposition and allow the jihad to continue unimpeded.
They're also, very strange that even the courts are not taking cognizance of these murderous pronouncements or the texts that preach murder. At least the courts should have been more forthright as far as this is concerned.
I'm sorry, who?
Politicians can have their compulsions, but what about the courts?
Oh, well, the courts are just as corrupt because those judges are appointed by the same politicians. And so they don't know anything either. The ignorance about Islam in the United States is near total. And not only is the ignorance near total, but the people who are ignorant, who are in positions of power, are confident that they know all about it and they know what they need to know, and that those who are calling attention to matters of concern are the problem. That is, that they, like, take for example Bernie Sanders, who I quoted earlier. Bernie, I'm sure, I would bet you $1,000 he never read the Quran. He's probably never even opened one. I doubt he's ever seen one in real time. And he has no idea what it says. But he knows that Islam is peace because people who are around him tell him that. And he knows that Muslims are victims of the evil right-wingers. And so that's all he knows. And he knows then that when we sound the alarm and say jihad is a matter of concern, We're the problem. We're the bigots and the Islamophobes. And so we have to be silenced. The idea that we might know more about Islam than he does, and that we might be sounding the alarm about a real threat, it just doesn't exist as far as he's concerned. That's never entered his mind. And there are so many people just like that.
On the other hand, I'll give you the Indian example, because in India, we've been very free to talk about Islam. Not just that, I personally, in Jaipur Dialogues, I have been hosting a lot of ex-Muslims. And those ex-Muslims have been really removing the veil. And, well, I haven't had any felonies or any counts of misdemeanors
That's good.
against me.
But
And I'll give you some good news. You know this slogan, "Sar tan se juda, gustakh nabi ki ek hi saza, sar tan se juda, sar tan se juda." That, yeah, that's it. Sar tan se juda. So yesterday, the High Court at Allahabad, which is in Uttar Pradesh, the largest Indian state, they held that this slogan is actually treason. And today again, some people who had charges against them, who had charges slapped against them because they encouraged people to shout these slogans. And they went for a relief to the High Court, and they denied them that day, that no, this is vile and this is completely against all tenets of secular existence, quote unquote. And they have held it to be treason. So I think that's a news that you can share with your legal luminaries out there in the US.
that's very
And
good.
they would probably say that the Indians are backward.
I don't know what they'd say, but it's an example to be followed. And I would hope that they would follow it, because what we have in the US actually is the opposite problem, that the First Amendment guarantees the freedom of religion. Now, the framers of the Constitution never understood the grant of the freedom of religion to be a permission, a license to break other laws. That would have been ridiculous. But that's exactly how it's being understood today. Several years ago, there were 2 Muslim doctors in the Detroit area who were put on trial for female genital mutilation. And the judge dismissed the case on the basis of the First Amendment, saying that the freedom of religion allowed them to do this. Well, I would like to ask this judge, if you had a couple of jihad terrorists who came before you, would you dismiss the case and say it's their freedom of religion to kill unbelievers because that's what the Quran teaches?
Correct.
It's ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And so the Indian court ruling is a good example to follow. But in the United States, we have not yet reached this understanding that this is something that has to be worked out. The First Amendment, freedom of religion, goes as far as the other laws go. It cannot be understood as some sort of a free pass to break all the other laws if you can say that it's your religion that allows you to do so. But this has not yet been adjudicated.
Quite right. We can go to the questions now,
All right.
and then we can hope that maybe Vibhutis will join us.
The jinn are after him.
Yes. This is Raghav. Both Crusade and Jihad have similar commandments.
Yeah, this ain't
follow.
true. Sorry. It's not a fact. I have written about this at great length. You can read my book, The History of Jihad, and you will see. The Crusades began in the year 1095, and the last Crusader domains were destroyed in the year 1291. That is 196 years. The Jihads began in the 7th century and are still going. In the first place, do you see the difference in that? Second, the various sects of Christianity, Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant, they do not teach that Christians should conquer and Christianize other peoples. Yes, this has happened. Yes, it did happen, but it happened in defiance of the teachings of Christianity, not in accord with them. Islam teaches, fight them until persecution is no more and religion is all for Allah. That's the Quran. So you could be minding your own
8.39, yeah.
839, right. Minding your own business, but if your religion is not for Allah, then some Muslim might think he has to fight you. So I am not justifying the evils that were done by the Crusaders, and there's no denying them. However, the idea that these are equivalent is historically myopic, and it reflects an ignorance of both history and the theology of Islam and Christianity. Islamic jihad is an ongoing threat. The Crusades are not. There are no Crusaders today. The idea that the Pope would call a crusade is ridiculous. You look at this Pope, he loves Islam, for one thing. And so we need to be realistic about this. I understand, given the history of India and Goa and all of this, that you would be suspicious or even dislike Christianity. I understand that very well. This, however, should not cloud your thinking into the idea that Christians and Muslims pose an equivalent threat. The jihad is coming only from one side.
Okay, next one. Gauri Kulkarni, Namaste Vibhuti Ji and Robert Ji. Why do you think Sharia was not implemented in Pakistan?
Well, it wasn't implemented at first because Jinnah was more of a nationalist than a Muslim. He was not an observant Muslim himself. He wanted to have the Muslims together in an identitarian community. It wasn't so much an ethnic community because it was different ethnicities, but it was based around their Islam and yet not. The way to understand this is to look at Turkey and Iran. Modern Turkey was founded by Kemal Ataturk, and Kemal Ataturk hated Islam, and he ascribed the fall of the Ottoman Empire to Islam. And so he said, we're going to construct a new Turkey, a modern Turkey, on the basis of a Western-style secular republic, because the West has defeated the Islamic world, and this shows the victory and superiority of the West. He was still thinking like a Muslim. And so we will imitate the West. And that's why there's nominally secular Turkey even to this day. And then in Iran, before the Islamic Republic, Reza Shah in the 1930s, he imitated the same thing. And he had a Muslim state. In Turkey, Ataturk created a Muslim state, and he oversaw the murder of many of the Armenians and Greeks who were Christians. And that's why I'm in America now. But he was not, it was a Muslim identity that was secular. And it was the same thing in Iran. And that's what Jinnah envisioned. But then Zia al-Haq brought in Sharia. And there is still resistance to the absolute full implementation. That's why you have the Pakistan Taliban that is the Pakistani government, because they're not Islamic enough. Even though they're completely fanatical and Sharia adherent, is still not Islamic enough for the Pakistan Taliban. So they fight.
They have a double standard also. The Sharia is not for the elites. It's only for the high polloi.
That's right, because nobody really wants to live under Sharia, and the elite can afford to avoid it. It reminds me of I knew a military man who had been stationed in Bahrain, and he went into a bar one day, and he was shocked because there were all these Saudi sheikhs in there. And he said to the bartender, "Isn't this against Islam?" And he said, "Yes, but they come across the border, and it's like they have a free pass now."
Okay, next one. Offensive jihad phobia. Should we apply this logical solution to Islam? If you cannot delete a snake, delete its fangs. If you cannot delete its fangs, at least delete venom.
Well, how do you do that in Islam? Would you edit the Quran? If you edited the Quran and removed the violent verses, then many Muslims would say, this is not Quran. We want our real Quran. And you just make things worse because they would think you're trying to destroy Islam by taking out its right to defend itself.
Yeah, and they'll accuse you of blasphemy as well.
Exactly. So I don't know how that would be done. Delete the venom, delete the fangs. It's a nice thought, but in practice, I don't know how the analogy would work.
Okay, next one. Yash. Robert, do you believe that there is an element of Muslim Brotherhood getting into system by pumping bootload of money to Mr. Trump's companies?
Yeah, that's possible. I am sorry to say that that's possible, but what else explains it? He was saying that Qatar was a terror threat in 2016, and now they're our great friends. So what's different? Well, they gave him an airplane, and the Trump company has all these business dealings there. Maybe that's it. Maybe it isn't. Maybe there's some other explanation. But I think it's at least a possible explanation.
And he loves the failed marshal.
There you go. So I don't think it can be ruled out.
Okay, next one. Offensive jihad phobia. Why Islam is growing in the West? How did Jesus, King of Jews in Christ, is equal to Messiah, become Son of God, which was Roman title? Build third temple in Jesus' name.
Okay, well, I'm not going to get into Christian theology here. It's not on topic, but why is Islam growing in the West? Islam is growing in the West because of Western leaders who are idiots and who are self-serving and short-sighted. And they think if we bring in large numbers of Muslims into the West, they'll vote for us. This is what the Democrats in the United States are thinking. And so they bring them all in, and they don't know or care about the implications of bringing them in, because they know that only Islamophobes think there's any problem with Sharia or jihad. So that's why that's happening.
Okay, next. This is not relevant. Move on. This next. Yes. Recently, I noticed a set of US right podcasters attacking Israel and slowly creating softness towards Islam. Someone is pumping oil money.
Yes, it does seem so. And we have seen that it was actually reported in the mainstream press years ago in 2017 that Qatar was targeting Trump officials with influence operations. And so it may be that this is now, we're seeing that effort bear fruit.
Okay. Next one, Patriot Enfield. Good day, Mr. Robert. What's your take on the Groypers?
It's kind of the same as the last question, that it seems to me you're talking about the effect of Qatari money. Now, are there not any people who are convinced of that point of view? I'm sure there are. But it's incoherent in the first place, because they say, for example, that Israel is a big problem and a threat to the United States and a threat to the world, but Islam is not. Well, whatever you might think of Israel, the territory they're fighting over in Gaza is vanishingly small on a map of the world. And you look at the Islamic world and everywhere that jihad is raging, it's just ridiculous to think Israel's the threat and not Islam. But this is, I think, only somebody who is deeply hateful and hates Jews would think this. And somebody who is bought would think this. And so maybe it's a combination of both.
Okay, next one, Vijayan. Tucker Carlson criticizes Ilhan Omar and demonizes Israel in the same breath. It's bizarre media gymnastics. Academia takes Jewish money and does the same.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to criticize Ilhan Omar and Israel. If you were really against Ilhan Omar, then why? Is it just because she's corrupt and she married her brother to get him into the country, and because she is a clearly anti-American and in the American Congress? Well, that's fine. but do you care about the larger threat that she represents? If you don't, why not? And if you are aware of the larger threat that she represents, and you don't, and you're also against Israel, then you don't really understand the larger threat that she represents, because you can't oppose jihad and oppose Israel. Israel is on the front lines of the jihad. If you oppose jihad in a consistent way, then you must support Israel. That's all there is to it.
Okay, next one. Dhruva Mukhopadhyay, Hindus, Jews, and Christians are hounded as Islamophobes, but not China, despite abusing the Uyghurs. Why? Also, sir, I lived in Sweden for a year. It has gone to hell. Lastly, is Greta a Muslim?
Okay, despite, yes, why is China not Islamophobic? Because China doesn't care. China doesn't care what you call it and will not change if you pressure it. And so why bother? The people who cry Islamophobia, they do it for a purpose. They do it in order to manipulate the West into doing its bidding and manipulate India into doing its bidding. And that's what it's for. They only do it because they know that they are liable to succeed. In the case of China, they know there's no use. There's no point in that because they're not going to prevail. The Chinese, it's a bloodthirsty totalitarian dictatorship. So whatever you call them, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. Sweden has indeed gone to hell, and this is because of mass Muslim migration, just as I've been warning and speaking about on this program. I don't know if Greta is a Muslim or not. If she is, she hasn't announced it. But she doesn't have to be a Muslim to do what she's doing. She just has to be a useful idiot, which she quite clearly is.
Okay, next. New Horizon. As of Europe, some nations have coped quite well with the Islamic migration, like Poles, Hungary. Do you see them as strong frontier, or will they fall too?
They'll fall if they have to succumb to the pressure from the European Union. The European Union is bent on destroying Europe and bringing in mass numbers of Muslims. And Poland and Hungary are holding out. So if they continue to hold out and they can outlast the European Union, they will survive. Otherwise, they'll go under like the rest of Europe.
Okay. Vignesh Prabhu Sanjay ji, any update on Feb 26 JD Summit at Mumbai? None so far. We'll let you know. So that's all. That's all we have for today. And thank you very much, Robert.
Thank you. Always
Thank
a
you
pleasure.
very much. And sorry for Vibhuti Jha. It seems to have copped out completely now.
Yes, give him my regards.
It didn't come back at all. So I'll check with him. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for watching. Good night.